Hey, what's up? So today back with another manga spotlight. This one is going to be on a manga here titled The Story of a Certain Closet Headman by Fujimiya Fuhito, published in 2016. And the reason I wanted to do a separate video on this is because this is a really unique type of manga. It is a woodblock print manga. So the mangaka does all the manga that they've done so far is actually via this woodblock print method. And so Fujimiya Fuhito, he has published an X. So this manga here was actually serialized in X as well, published by Seirin Kogeisha. But he's only released 2 tankobon so far, this one included. He spent over 10 years making those 2 woodblock manga collections. And it was inspired and instructed by Shinji Nagashima for 3 years. So Shinji Nagashima was a prolific contributor to Garo in its early stages from, I would say, 70s onwards, also probably in 60s as well. But yeah, Fujimiya Fuhito, this is the only manga that I have from him. I'm still trying to find the other collection that he has. But the premise of this story is we have this man here who has been transformed, or his head has been transformed into like a sort of closet head. So this is, here he is. And the first page, we've got a really cool color print as well of that man there. So we start off with a story. The premise, starts off with a foreword or a prologue where it explains what happens to this man. So pretty much this is a story about being outcasted, being isolated. He was pretty much a recluse. He left the world and retreated into his apartment. And after a year, one day, his head had transformed into this closet. So from that point on, the rest of the story continues his journey after that transformation. And so pretty much the entire book, the entire manga is a sort of observation diary from this man. And so we are set towards the end of the bubble era in Japan. It's like late 1980s, early 1990s. And what's really cool about this is that so first of all, it does remind me of, if you've ever read The Boxman by Kobo Abe, that same starting premise of a man who, in this case, has got a closet head. In The Boxman, it's like a box instead for a head. But in Kobo Abe's book, it's not strictly the same. It's more perverse than this one. This one's more just focusing on observing society through the lens of someone who is an outcast. And we start off with him being homeless. So it kind of continues on from that initial point where his head has been turned into a closet, where because he's homeless, he can observe the world around him and everything happening. So he looks at, for example, what's happening with the police as they chase people. He watches violence happen in the streets at night. He also sees how other homeless people are living their lives as well. So a lot of different viewpoints that we get from our narrator and main character. And also as well, the reason why the setting and the context of the story is important, the end of the bubble economy, is because he's pretty much like a symbol of those who are left behind from my perspective. As things transition, as society moves on, because we do have him as a homeless person, someone who had, he used to go to university, but eventually everything took a big toll on him where he couldn't keep up with it anymore, had no aspirations, and slowly retreated into his safe place, that being his home. People like that being left behind and pretty much suffering from not having a purpose, or sometimes it is their fault, sometimes it's not. There's a lot of different things that can happen in circumstances like this. But the way that the story is told with all of this woodblock style is so captivating. Like, you could just spend, like, each panel is pretty much its own piece of art, right? The amount of time that it must have taken for Fujimiya to do all this, in 10 years, he had put out 2 tankobon, both in the short story collections, but either way, that is a sort of testament to how long it can take to create these woodblock pieces, to assemble them, and figure out the paneling and all that type of stuff. So it's really cool to see such a unique work like this. But yeah, to go on from that, I'll talk about it in the spoiler section, because the entirety of the book is not just from the perspective of our main character, the closet head man. We do get other perspectives later on too. But yeah, that initial section was just about the premise of the book. So I highly recommend, even if this one is like an easy case of, even if you don't understand Japanese, can't read it, still having this book is really cool. It's a hardcover book. You'll be owning something that is extremely unique in the world of manga. And in terms of its rarity, I'm not too sure how rare this is. It was published in 2016, so 8 years ago. It can be somewhat hard to find, but I do believe it should be relatively more common compared to other manga. So going now into some of the spoilers about the story. So each chapter, the first couple of chapters are from the perspective of our narrator here. So for example, the first chapter is him observing someone being chased for a drug, like someone's like running away from police with some drugs. And I believe he happens to pick up some of the drugs. Yeah, this is an example here. So here he is, he's just on the bench. Someone's running away. They slip a bag under the vending machine, and he goes down and picks it up. And yeah, so he pockets the drugs. But other chapters as well. Oh, this is also really cool too. Just a silent set of 2 pages where you can really just look at the art and just consume everything visually. It's got also these very satisfying looking puffs of smoke as well. But yeah, so to give an example of other things that happen, we have him at the park. He is, this is where it's revealed that he's homeless. He also observes other homeless people. So there's another homeless guy that he knew about that sold food. But one time, the food that he sold to other people gave food poisoning. So no one trusted it anymore. And that homeless man had died from freezing. So quite a sad observation from the main character. Here's another time where he sees fights happening in the alleyways at night. So not a very happy manga at all, very depressing actually. So it depends on whether you're up for this type of story to read, just because everything does feel very bleak, like there's no hope, that sort of thing. And towards the middle of the manga, we also get a section where he explains how before he went to university, he wanted to study archaeology, but he couldn't really deal with the pressure, and amongst other things had led him to isolate himself for that 1 year until he turned into his head turned into a closet box. But throughout the manga, there's a lot of just dialogue or monologues of him just contemplating things about his life, about how other people live as well. But on top of that, when we move on a little bit later into the story, we get other perspectives. So for example, this chapter now focuses on another man who is a factory worker at a bread factory. And while he is like traveling, he spots the closet head man under a bridge. And so from these chapters, the closet head man still kind of does appear, but we focus more on the actual character. So, you know, this factory worker, he's also in a similar position where he's kind of isolated and alone. He can't really progress in life because he's in such a job where career progression isn't as, it's definitely hard to do. So he's kind of stuck in his position. And he'd observe the closet head man like sleeping in a coffin near the riverbed. But one day he realizes that here it is, the coffin here, it disappears after some rain. So here's the sleeping bed of the closet head man. We slowly see it wash away in the river. And all of this is being observed by our factory worker here. And so mysteriously, he goes back and it's disappeared. And so we move on to another chapter where it's another perspective as well. It's a 40-year-old man who had to quit his job temporarily to get some treatment for his back. He is also alone as well. So every character we see experiences some level of isolation and loneliness. But in this case, the reappearance of the closet head actually comes when he goes to a store and finds solely the head there. So not the body. We don't know what happened to the actual man, but he finds the head. But to him, it's just a closet, right? A little piece of wood for him. But mysteriously, so he leaves it in his apartment, but the bananas he leaves out are eaten. So they disappear. So something is happening with this closet head where it's still kind of alive. It's implying that maybe the soul of the person is still there, which is quite interesting as well. But we get a continuation of the story where for this man, because of his surgery, because of his financial difficulties, he does have to leave the apartment. And so the closet head is actually left in the apartment, which leads us to the final chapter of the story where we again jump to another perspective. This time we're in a neighborhood here where it's actually skipped over to 2015. So earlier in all these other chapters, they were like 1988, 1991, end of the bubble era in Japan. This time skip to 2015. A woman in her 70s is living in this area that is due for expansion and redevelopment plans by construction companies and whatever. So she's living in an old house there, and we do see the closet head still here. So it has survived. It's just moved on to someone else who's holding it now. But it's a very sad end to the story because, you know, we still see a very bleak tone to the story where our elderly woman here, she's living alone, doesn't really have anyone else, and she's kind of being forced out by those construction companies. So for her, she is also quite isolated and she's being pushed out physically by these companies. And it's a really, really sad and honestly pretty fucked ending as well, where because of the pressures to evict this lady, we actually see some of the workers or some people related to the construction company, they go to her house at night and they set the place alight, which is just so fucked. But you can see the panels here. I love this panel, and it's a very sad scene, but you can see how it's very silent. You know that this is the head of that closet head man. But even if you didn't know that, this would just seem like a normal object in the room. But because of the whole context of this manga, we know that this is that person, and he's being consumed in the flames along with the house. And the story ends with just a brutal scene of the house and the trees around it burning, as if the fire was like a cremation. So I'm not too sure whether the woman was still in there at the time, which would be even worse. But either way, the lengths that they go to, you know, evict these people is just crazy. And that's where the story ends, with an afterword by Fujimiya and a little scene here as well. So an amazing manga, a very emotional one towards the ending as well, but I really did love how Fujimiya chose to not just keep our main character here as the only narrator. He chose to include other people who are experiencing similar things to him, and the fact that we have his head popping up as a motif throughout the rest of the story is a really good one to sort of represent those who are left behind by society, those who are rejected and outcasted, much like all of the other additional narrators that popped out throughout the story. But everything about this manga, like especially with the woodblock style, elevates it. Because in this story, I think in another style of manga, like not woodblock printing, but just like if it was drawn out, it would still work. But because it's so unique with the actual woodblock style, it just makes everything better. It makes the reading experience better. Thinking about the story itself, all of that is more poignant because of the woodblock style. So really an amazing manga. I really loved reading this, and it's a manga that you can revisit a lot as well, because there's technically no plot. It's like an observation from the closet headman perspective, and an observation into the other characters that appear as well. And also another note, the rain. The rain looks really good in woodblock form. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I will try to find the other tankobon that Fujimiya has put out. Still no, I haven't seen it yet, but if it does pop up, I will pick it up and I will show it off in the video, in another video. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.